Tale of two nations reflected in the headlines this morning. Is Trump imploding, or is it a big nothing burger? Conservative media are not mentioning Trump by name in their headlines, but the mainstream media is pulling no punches. Trump's aides, they're in trouble. Let's talk about that. Matt Lewis is a senior columnist at the Daily Beast, and John Fredericks is a conservative talk radio host and former co-chair of the Trump campaign in Virginia. Welcome to both of you. So, Matt, I want to start with you. So the question is, Fox News, as in Sean Hannity, called the Russia investigation, quote, a witch hunt. And then he talked about Hillary Clinton's alleged crimes. But Matt, Hillary Clinton is not president. So I guess my underlying question is, can Fox News save President Trump?
No, they can't, because this is not a political, we're sort of past the point of this being a political discussion. It's now a legal issue. We have Robert Mueller. He has subpoena power. He can indict people. He can squeeze those people to maybe even wear a wire. And so this is past the point where political perceptions matter. But I do think, in terms of our culture, our society, there is a problem where there is, really a tale of two Americas here. And like, I have an aunt, for example, who was convinced that Hillary was about to be arrested. And if all you do, and I think it's the same thing on the left or the right, if you constantly are only, if you're a conservative but you're only listening to Rush Limbaugh, only watching Fox News, you sort of live in a bubble, and you could have an alternate universe really going on for your entire life, and so I think that is troubling.
So John, do you agree with that?
No, I deal in facts. I'm not sure exactly where Matt is going with this. I guess that's the traditional view of some people that are on the fringes. But I can tell you this, these indictments have absolutely
Matt is on the fringes?
Nothing to do.
Wait. You think Matt is on the fringes, or are there other fringe factor?
No, Matt is not on the fringes. Okay. I said the position he's taken are on the fringes. There's going to be the extremists in any ideological fight or spectrum that believe what they want to believe. But I think the majority of Americans are looking at this with a reality lens, and they're asking themselves, okay, what exactly did President Trump do here? Where's the collusion? There's nothing. Oh, yes, there might be more indictments, and oh, there might be this, and oh, there might be a squeeze on these people. Look, Paul Manafort and Rick Gates, these are bad guys, according to this 12-point indictment. They laundered money and other things. If there was allegedly, if there was any bad decision the president made in this, it was hiring Paul Manafort. And many of us that were around the campaign were aghast when he hired this guy, brought to him by the typical Republican operatives, and then he brought in Rick Gates, and now they're in this mess. But none of this had anything to do with collusion or the Trump campaign or anything to do with
Well,
Russians.
that's true. The Manafort issue does not have anything to do with collusion. But the Papadopoulos thing, that could well have something to do with collusion, because George Papadopoulos was Mr. Trump's foreign policy advisor. Mr. Trump did know him. I know that Mr. Trump, called him a volunteer boy or something like that, a low-level volunteer.
He was a volunteer. Look,
but
Carol,
he was still connected to the campaign.
Sure they were, but at the beginning of this campaign, at the beginning of this campaign, it was very difficult for the Trump campaign to get anybody to sign on any policy or document or anything else, because nobody thought he could win, and they didn't like some of the things that had come out about him, some of the things he said. So they just got people to sign on to things. This guy was at one meeting. I never met him. I never heard of him. He was not paid. He was not an operative within the campaign. He was not in Trump Tower. He didn't have any say in anything, and then all of a sudden he pops up doing emails, 30 years old, trying to make believe he's something he's not, gain influence or something else.
Okay, so let me pose, and I hear you. I want to pose this question to Matt. I want to pose this question to Matt, because if you're Russia, right, and you want to use someone within the Trump orbit, right, wouldn't you choose someone like George Papadopoulos, some low-level guy who can float under the radar but get something done?
Yeah, I think they had many feelers out, and they were trying to find vulnerabilities anywhere that they can find it. And this is basically how they operate. If you've ever seen The Americans, which is, I know it's fiction, but it's fiction based on a lot of truth. you know, the way they operate, if they can find a vulnerability, if they can get somebody, you know, to start working on their behalf, then that person becomes bribable. That person basically becomes an operative of theirs. And so I think that they probably had a multi-pronged approach here, and to try to find out information and influence the, you know, the Trump administration. So, yeah, and of course, you know, you could have a very young person who is, I mean, by the way, Paul Manafort wasn't paid either by the Trump campaign, so I guess by that definition, he was a volunteer too. But look, this guy could be a low-level staffer, and still, it's possible that he was wearing a wire and he could have been interacting with senior-level staffers, and he might, you know, that's the danger of this if you're the Trump administration. Maybe there's nothing there. But if there's something there, I believe that Mueller will find it because, you know, the squeeze that's going to come. And by the way, what about, I do think it's an indictment on the Trump administration that he would have a campaign chairman like Paul Manafort. But let's not forget about Michael Flynn. That's another example. And you know, I remember the days.
And his son, right?
And his son. And if I can tell you that if Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity, we're talking about a Democratic president who had their campaign manager indicted and had their national security advisor basically be forced out a month in. I don't think they would be sort of giving people a pass and saying, well, this is just a young advisor, this is a volunteer. You know, I think they would be a little more skeptical in that case.
Matt, look,
that's
Matt,
the way our
come
country
on, Matt.
plays
No
right
meetings
now.
were set up. None of these emails got responded to. And the comparison you made between Manafort not getting paid and Papadopoulos is completely false. Manafort made his money by setting up a mail company and trying to make money on the Trump mail in the primary that he set up with Rick Gates, the guy that he brought in, his protege. So to say that Manafort was not making money off it, totally false. He was a campaign chairman. The Manafort hire by Donald Trump was the worst decision he made in the campaign. It was a disaster. The guy was a terrible chairman, horrible. He couldn't even answer his emails. He had 24,000 unanswered emails on his iPhone. The guy couldn't even navigate through that. He was a disaster, didn't do anything for delegates or anything else. Bad hire. But this has nothing to do with collusion or the Trump campaign. None of these emails ever got responded to by George Papadopoulos.
Right. No, and I get you, but I would also say that I don't think the investigation is over with Paul Manafort. I think it's just beginning, right? So we'll just have to sit tight and see what happens. But I hear you both. Matt Lewis, John Fredericks, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Thanks, Matt.